Israel attacks a UN girls' school in Gaza, killing 15 refugees sheltering there. Scores are injured. And another attack on a market in Sharjah, all but wiped out at the weekend. Here, 17 were killed, 160 injured. Good evening. The deaths in Gaza have topped 1,300, nearly 100 killed today alone. The United Nations has described the attack on their school as a serious violation of international law, adding that they gave Israel's security forces the precise coordinates of the school on 17 separate occasions. Tonight we are live in Gaza and will talk live to one of Hamas's most senior officials. And in Israel itself, as 3 more Israeli soldiers die today, we report on how the mood for war is hardening.
And we need to end the propaganda from both sides because...
The propaganda? What kind of propaganda?
Also on tonight's programme, already a catastrophe in parts of Africa. Now Ebola poses a very serious threat to the UK, says the Foreign Secretary, as he puts border officials, airlines and doctors on alert. Azelle Rodney was in a car which Scotland Yard believed was on its way to an armed robbery. He died when police opened fire. Now the firearms officer has been charged with murder. And the square mile brought to heel after the financial crisis. The Bank of England promises to claw back errant bankers' bonuses or clap them in jail.
And another Victorian English pier goes up in flames. This time it's Eastbourne. There are no reported injuries, but firefighters have proved unable to save the main arcade building. So Israel told them to leave their homes because they could be targeted for attack. They'd gone to the local UN school to seek refuge, only for that too to be shelled, killing at least 15 people and injuring very many more. The incident, yet another demonstration of the few areas in Gaza which can now be deemed safe from attack. Israeli tanks, planes and warships have been unrelenting in their pounding of the narrow strip of land which is Gaza. It is just 32 miles long and less than 7 miles wide at its widest point, and it is home to almost 2 million people. The Israeli Defense Force has extended a 3-kilometer buffer zone inside the border, effectively putting Israel in control of 44% of the Gaza Strip. Today, the United Nations says that before dawn, Israeli artillery hit families sheltering in a UN school in Jabalia. 15 children were killed, scores more wounded. The UN says it is the 6th time one of their schools has been hit, but concedes that Hamas rockets and weapons have been found at 3 of its schools since the conflict began. An airstrike in a neighborhood of Khan Yunis killed at least 5, wounded 15, and obliterated several homes. Israel said it was targeting Hamas, and 17 people have been killed and 150 wounded by Israeli shells and missiles in the buffer zone town of Sharjah, part of which was wiped out by attacks at the weekend. Our correspondent Paul Mason is live in Gaza and joins us now from the Al-Shifa hospital. Paul.
John, this is a place where ceasefires can be as deadly as battles. The Israelis declared one at 4 o'clock and people went out onto the streets. What happens next? There are very distressing images coming up. Basically, people went to Sharjah, the already flattened suburb, to see what they could find. They turned up at a market and a shell hit them. Now, we understand 20 people are dead, 160 injured, and many are horribly because it involved a petrol station. And their relatives have been coming out here behind me from the Shifa hospital in great distress. But this earlier incident, the attack on the UN school, may be more diplomatically significant because that has been accused of breaking international laws of war by the UN itself. I went down there a couple of hours after it happened to try and find out what had happened. And again, I have to warn you that there are distressing images coming up. All night the Israelis pounded Jabalia. It's a dense civilian area in the north of Gaza, massively damaged after days of war. There, did that happen last night? Yes. Last night. Where did it hit? Where? This is what we found at the UNRWA school, home to more than 3,000 refugees. At 5 a.m, after an explosion nearby, people were ordered into the buildings. This classroom was one of them. Whatever hit it was big enough to blow 2 holes in this cement wall. The blast come inwards. You can see where it's ripped through the roof, so anybody basically in its way likely to be killed or injured. 20 people died, according to officials. This man was there.
At 10 to 5 in the morning, suddenly shells came from over there. We found 9 men dead outside, more dead women and children inside.
The school is a centre for those displaced by fighting. When we arrived, people were hot and desperate. People who come here for safety were already leaving.
We don't know where to go, actually. And we ourselves, we don't know a safe place to go there.
Were there any militants around the school at the time?
No, we didn't have any militant or rocket or weapons. We didn't have, you can search, you can see by your own eyes.
I saw 3 shell holes, this one in the northern school block, 2 others at the south, the central point of all of them, the school itself. People here told us the shells came in from over there, the Erez crossing with Israel, maybe 1.5 kilometres away. And when they exploded, this is what they became. It's just ordinary shrapnel from a tank shell. Think about what it does to a human body. At a nearby hospital, there was chaos just after the shells struck. Dozens had been injured. The hospital's operating theatre struggled to cope. In the recovery ward, I met this boy, aged 15. His leg so badly injured that doctors were still deciding whether it would be amputated or not.
We were inside the school, and after the first shell hit, they told us to get out. The second one struck, and shrapnel hit my leg.
This is the 6th time in the conflict that Israel has hit an UNRWA school. Its boss was outraged.
The precise location of the Jabalia Elementary Girls' School and the fact that it was housing thousands of internally displaced people was communicated to the Israeli army 17, that's 17 times, to ensure its protection, the last being at 10 to 9 last night, just hours before the fatal shelling. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this serious violation of international law by Israeli forces.
Israel said it had been responding to mortar fire from right next to the school, but while the accusations flew at the hospital, there were other victims from other shells.
Do you think that Netanyahu is a good man to show that to the people that he said that we target the wanted people, they target the children?
Jabalia is a dense urban area where Hamas fighters live and have support. UNRWA itself said it had 3 times discovered rockets hidden in other schools. Faced with international outrage, Israel announced a 4-hour unilateral ceasefire. We tried to use that time to get nearer the front line, but the guns continued firing. The human toll is rising. 1,240 Palestinians have been killed, according to officials here. They include this 18-year-old killed in Jabalia market by a shell this morning. I told his father I was sorry. He told me this.
Today you're telling me you're sorry. Go and tell your Prime Minister to stop supporting Israel.
The anger among those bereaved today was palpable. And after the anger comes the grief.
Paul, what are the UN and others saying locally? I mean, behind the diplomatic language, do they think this is a war crime?
Well, they've used the exact language they used for a war crime, which is the breach of international law. You can hear the call to prayer happening behind me now. Look, outside that school I found this. This is a piece of shrapnel. The circumference of the thing that it's from indicates it's probably an artillery shell. Now, if you're going to fire that near a school, you have to know that you're not going to hit the school. The Israelis have both drones in the sky and in that area a blimp, a kind of balloon with a camera on it. All they need to do is roll the footage from that blimp to find out which tank or artillery piece fired that and then find out what the command was given. If the command was given hey, that's near a school, but go ahead anyway, then that's where it becomes a possible war crime. That's what the UN understand, because if you don't take adequate precautions, it's also criminal. No, I mean, look, war crimes are an emotive term. We have the term because in all wars, people break the rules. But ultimately, I've been known to Jabalia for hours today. It's a densely packed former refugee camp made into an informal settlement, classic third world slum. If you're going to fire stuff at it, this is going to happen. I think the only way to stop civilians dying in Jabalia is to stop firing at Jabalia.
Paul Mason in Gaza. Kathy.
Thanks, John. Well, as we've heard, Israel declared a 4-hour unilateral humanitarian ceasefire this afternoon. But even this excluded areas where its troops were on the ground and at risk of coming under attack. 3 soldiers were killed while uncovering a tunnel shaft that was booby-trapped in southern Gaza. 27 more have been injured today, but the public mood in Israel remains overwhelmingly behind the assault on Hamas, as Inigo Gilmore reports from Jerusalem.
This is now the key target of Israel's military, the so-called tunnels of terror. Today, the army said it had blown up 3 more of the tunnels coming from Gaza. And this is what they're scared of. In a video released by Hamas, their operatives can be seen infiltrating inside Israel before brazenly launching an attack, killing 5 soldiers. Such threats preoccupy many Israelis, and it's one reason why Palestinian deaths in Gaza scarcely get a mention. Israel is focused on its own victims. Last night, hundreds gathered at the Great Synagogue in Jerusalem for a memorial to 3 Israeli teenagers. Their killings in the West Bank triggered a bewildering surge of violence that no one now seems able to stop. They came to pay their respects, but also to show solidarity with their military as it relentlessly pounds Gaza.
Let them go till they clean them out. It's all our boys. We love them all dearly.
Joyce Boyne told me her son David was shot dead by a Hamas terrorist in 1996, and she insisted the offensive must continue.
We have the Lord above who directs us and watches over us, and we cannot show our weakness. We have a strong army, and we've got to stop it. Enough. Enough.
And we need to end the propaganda from both sides, because...
The propaganda? What kind of propaganda?
I don't know, I think it's...
A young American working in Israel decided to speak up. It didn't go down well.
Israel.
No, I'm not saying that. To criticize Israel is not necessarily anti-Israel.
Wait a second, what's the propaganda?
No, I'm not Jewish.
No, I figured. Okay, so you know what? Your life is not on the line, kid. And so you can be a big intellectual, but the bottom line is, when you're, you know what, I would suggest as a volunteer, go hang out in Sderot for a few days.
Well,
and
you
see
know,
all the
because
kids.
I'm not Jewish, I still have a voice, right?
With much of the nation speaking with one voice, the small numbers who do protest the war have found themselves targeted. Anti-war demos have been countered by protests staged by ultra-nationalists who are not afraid to air their racist, extreme views. Here they gleefully chant, "There's no more school in Gaza," because all the children are dead. These protests have often turned violent as incitement grows. Many anti-war activists say they've been attacked, sometimes with iron bars. One of those assaulted agreed to meet us, but insisted on remaining anonymous. Such is the climate of fear.
The people really believe and want to demolish the Palestinian people.
What do you mean demolish? Like eradicate, wipe them?
Yeah, I've got into several conversations in the last few weeks, which I stopped because it was too hard on my soul. But people were saying that we need to conquer Gaza, and we need to kill every Palestinian kid because he has the potential to become a terrorist when he grows up.
This climate of intolerance has in part been stoked by extreme rhetoric from Israel's political leaders. Ayelet Shaked recently caused international outrage when she quoted an unpublished article which appeared to justify the targeting of all Palestinian people. She said the article is as relevant today as it was at the time.
You recently issued a rather controversial posting on Facebook which referred to Palestinians as little snakes and also that appeared to endorse mass killing of Palestinians. Can you tell me about that posting?
It is just not true. I posted an article that really well 12 years ago, and in his article during the second Intifada, when buses will explode in Israel, he said that the shaheeds, the suicide bombers, who are doing that, exploding women and children, if their mothers encourage them, then they have to go with them or something like that. This is what he said.
But by posting that, you appear to endorse what he was saying.
No, I condemned any violence against innocent people, and I don't endorse it at all. Thank you.
Whatever her intentions, the fact that a member of parliament felt comfortable enough to publish such an inflammatory article says much about today's Israel, where those who speak out against the war can find themselves denounced as an enemy within.
Inigo Gilmore in Jerusalem. We're joined now from Beirut by Osama Hamdan. He's a foreign affairs spokesman for Hamas. Osama Hamdan, Israel has demonstrated that it is prepared to go on killing Gaza's women and children, civilians generally. Why are you encouraging them by still continuing to fire your ineffective rockets into their territory?
Well, in fact, the Israelis are killing women, children for 6 decades and more. They are killing the children and the women from 1948. Everyone remembers the Yassin massacre, Kafr Qasim massacre, Sabra and Shatila massacre. Everyone is remembering that.
But I'm asking about the now. I'm asking about the now. They are only attacking you because you continue to attack them. Your attacks on them have virtually no effect except causing hysteria. They are killing your children, your women, by the hundred.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, why do you go on firing rockets?
And this is their mentality. This is their history and this is their mentality, and everyone knows, and you have to know that they have started the attack against Gaza before launching any rocket against the Israelis. There was a ceasefire 2012, and the one who violated this ceasefire was the Israeli army. And we said from day number one that we are not willing to have a fight. We are not willing to react against the Israeli attack. And then they bombed houses, killed 11 children and women, injured more than 40 civilians.
Mr. Hamdan,
then there was a reaction. Then there was, excuse me, then there was a reaction. Excuse me.
Yeah.
No, there is. It's not fair to say whoever started, the Palestinians have to stop. It's not fair to ask the Palestinians to give up their necks and throats for the Israelis to slaughter it whenever and however they want that.
Mr. Hamdan,
it's fair to make pressure on Israel as an occupation to stop their attack against the civilians.
Is it fair to put your women, children, men in the line of fire of the Israelis simply because you will not stop firing your rockets? They are pointless. They're achieving nothing.
We did not put the children and the women in the line of fire. In fact, the Israelis are killing the women and children because their soldiers are dying in the field. If you look at the numbers, through that fight, more than 60 Israeli soldiers were killed, and all the killing on the Palestinian side was among the civilians.
Not true. You've had a number of your fighters killed coming out of the tunnels. In fact, every single one that's come out of your tunnels has died. It has been pointless. Now, why not stop? Why not stop tonight?
Excuse me, it's not true. You are talking about the Israeli story, which is not a story. You are buying the Israeli story, and you are not listening to the Palestinians who are suffering, who are being killed, who are under the occupation, who are now feeling very desperate because Netanyahu
And
destroyed the
Mr.
political
Hamdan,
solution
if you stop,
and the two-state solution. He undermined the solution, the political solution. You have to understand the Palestinians. If you are willing to accept the Israeli occupation, have them to occupy your lands and your homeland and welcome them there.
Mr.
They are
Hamdan,
not
the world
supposed to be
is
occupiers
sympathetic
for
to the
Palestinian
Palestinians' condition in Gaza, but you appear not to be. The world wants to save the women and children in Gaza. It appears you do not want to. If you stopped firing your rockets tonight, you would embarrass Israel into stopping fighting you.
This is totally false. We have agreed on a humanitarian ceasefire for several times, and the one who violated the ceasefire was the Israelis every time they violated the ceasefire. And in 2012, there was a ceasefire. The one who violated that was the Israelis, using a story of the 3 settlers, which everyone knows for true, that they were killed in a crime attack.
Mr. Hamdan, we have to restrict ourselves to what's going on now.
Excuse me, you have to understand the facts, not to buy the false story of the Israelis who are occupying the Palestinian land.
Okay, well, here's a fact from the United Nations, Mr. Hamdan. Here is a fact from the United Nations. This is a fact from the United Nations. You have put rockets and weapons in 3 of their schools. They admit that. Why? Why are you putting rockets and things in schools, in hospitals? That's why they get hit.
This is not true. When someone said that, we called for a formation for independent investigation committee to investigate about that, and then they said it was not a real story. We are not sure about what was being said. This is what the UN answered. So we are not accepting that. We won't accept to use the schools. I want to remind you, in 2008,
Mr. Hamdan, I'm sorry, we have not got time to go back into history. What the people of Gaza are pleading for is a ceasefire.
You don't want to hear the history of the criminals, and you want the Palestinians to accept the crime killing their own people.
Osama Hamdan,
today,
I'm afraid
Ban Ki-moon said, today Ban Ki-moon said that there is no excuse for bombing the school in Jabalia. That was said by Ban Ki-moon today after the Israelis bombed the school.
Osama Hamdan, thank you very much indeed for joining us from Beirut. That is Hamas's foreign affairs spokesman.